Welcome to What is Going On for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
And welcome to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and as the 2016 election approaches, America appears to be spiraling into a dysfunction that threatens us all, including our allies around the world. The two-party system, sprung from the aims of democracy, has become violently divisive, almost to the point where there are two Americas, each at the other's throat. America is being pulled apart, and every citizen feels the pain from this profoundly. When did political discourse become a boxing match? How did America, founded on the highest of principles of justice and freedom, get so far off course? And most importantly, is it too late to repair the damage and get back on track? With me today to answer these questions and share his visionary blueprint for America's political, financial, social and sacred evolution is political strategist, social innovator, entrepreneur and founder and CEO of the Shift Network, Stephen Dinan. Formerly a senior staffer at the Institute of Noetic Science, where he was the driving force behind the Shift in Action program, Stephen Dinan also directed and helped create the Esalen Institute's Centre for Theory and Research, a think tank for scholars, researchers and teachers to explore human potential frontiers. He's a member of the prestigious Transformational Leadership Council and Evolutionary Leaders Group, the author of 2 books, Radical Spirit, Spiritual Writings from the Voice of Tomorrow, and the newly released and exquisitely timed Sacred America, Sacred World, Fulfilling Our Mission in Service to All. Stephen Dinan, welcome.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Sandie.
Stephen, you've been writing Sacred America, Sacred World for 10 years. Is the timing of its publication coincidence, or was there some galvanizing factor pushing you to get it finished and released right now?
I really intuited that 2016 is a pivotal moment for America and for the larger world. I really see us, first of all, in a critical decade, that this is when the collective crises have reached a crescendo point, and we really need to choose fully and passionately a positive future and to let go of a lot of what has been not working in the world. And 2016, because the American elections are so pivotal really for the future of the planet, I felt that it was important to get a voice of what I hope is higher consciousness and spiritual depth and a more unifying vision to come out in the midst of what is going to be probably one of the ugliest political seasons we've experienced. It's already been quite dramatic and very intense. And so July 5th I chose as the publication date with my publisher, partially because it's about the next evolution of America. And so July 4th being our Independence Day, so July 5th is all about what do we do next? Where do we evolve further? How do we go beyond independence and all of the assertion of individual will that comes with independence into interdependence and a deeper level of collaboration, not only with each other in America, but really with the larger world?
Well, of course, we're seeing, surprises daily on the political scene. When you first established that date, was the picture looking somewhat different, or is it proceeding just as you thought it might?
I have sensed, I established the date before it was clear how the primary seasons were going to shake out, but I haven't been that surprised, actually. In some ways, the Trump versus Hillary setup right now is that and Trump in many ways is an exaggerated version of many of the aspects of America that we're mostly outgrowing. part of the trick is not to necessarily fear and fight and hate that which we're outgrowing, but to understand it and to understand the values underneath and what it may be expressing. And so in many ways, Trump is an exaggerated version of the hypermasculine. He's kind of the ultimate alpha male and going to solve problems by, deal making and intimidation and force. And that in many ways is a kind of an exaggerated version of what I think of as an imbalance in the American psyche. So we were founded on a revolutionary war. And I ultimately, in retrospect, believe that we didn't need to have a violent separation from England, that if we had been a bit more patient as a country, there would have been a way to individuate without a violent separation. And the reason that's important is that it's sort of templated into the American psychology. Violence and revolutionary fire and force are sort of required for growth. And so that has led overall America to be overly masculine in both how we are internally. We have high rates of crime and violence and a gun culture, a celebration of that, as well as very aggressive in our foreign policy as well. And because of that imbalance, we need to come back into re-honoring the feminine and coming into a place of wholeness and deep sacred respect. And when we have masculine and feminine working together in an optimized way, that's what creates new life. That's what creates the beauty of a child. That creates families. It creates companies. It creates a country. So part of why I put the Lady Liberty on the cover of Sacred America is that this restoration and celebration of the feminine is very essential, not just on a kind of a rights level or even income level, but really like as a culture to celebrate the feminine as equally as the masculine. And so we have this almost exaggerated version right now of like the ultimate alpha male, billionaire, chest thumping tough guy, and then we have potentially our first woman president. And so there's a way in which they're embodying this culture clash, and personally I believe that Hillary's going to win, but I think that in some ways it's not just important to win and do whatever it takes to do that, but it's more about shifting the tenor of the conversation. And so I'm personally going to go to the Republican National Convention. I don't have tickets yet, but I'm going to be in Cleveland. I'm going to do an event beforehand and spend time and really make bridges with Republican leadership, partially because I recognize in a truly sacred world, we really see and honor the value of every living thing. That means every political party and position as well. And we can begin to see that conservative value systems need to be honored in the next evolution of America. So sometimes we get in this model where we think, okay, in order to create the new, we need a revolution. We need to kind of violently overthrow the old, and then once we've kind of vanquished the opposition, we can create the new. But actually that tends to create a lot of discord and there's like a real civil war quality versus bridge building of saying, what can we understand and respect and bless about people who have different political positions and really work together then on evolving to the next level and find the common ground that is there.
The shoot, ready, aim, attitude does get us into a lot of trouble. And you're right, when, we are being polarized, and we're being polarized for a reason, because I think people need to examine their belief systems. What do I really feel about this? And am I looking at it as, through the right lens? Because one of the things that really shook me up about your book was how it made me think about my own attitudes. I can be very, liberal when it comes to all kinds of issues. And yet when it comes to politics, I find myself taking one strong stance and completely rejecting everything about the other party. That's not right.
Yeah, and it's, to be compassionate for ourselves, when you're talking about making decisions about issues that affect our lives on many different levels, from how we're taxed to whether there's a Social Security net to whether it affects every level of our life, politics, and so it impinges on our sovereignty as beings. Whereas most of our life we're getting to make our own decisions and we get to kind of be our own boss, but politics does have major impacts, and so it's natural that it becomes a charged situation. But we have to move beyond that and start to really be able to what I call do political cross-training. For me, it took the form of one example when Sarah Palin was the vice presidential candidate. I just hated her. I could not stop. Every time she would speak, I couldn't stand her. And I realized ultimately that I had work to do in that arena. And so I made a point of reading both of her books. And in doing that, I actually came to appreciate her more as a person and her value system, and understanding how she was raised and why she might have taken on certain value systems. It didn't necessarily make me more conservative, but it made me more respectful of the position she takes, including that kind of gunslinging frontierswoman kind of energy. And there's a way that I found it more charming rather than like disdainful by the end. And I think that's a great example because it's not that there was when I was younger, I used to think of people who were more conservative as the opposition, that we had to kind of somehow just triumph over them in order to make societal progress, and that they were holding things back. And what I've come to see more recently in the last decade or so is that a society evolves step by step. And you need something that holds the society together, the glue, that keeps the fabric of a culture intact. And in a human body, that's like there's a homeostasis, because we don't want to go out of certain range of our pH balance and our neurochemistry. It's like there's only a narrow range where life is successful. Same thing with a culture. Things can fragment and break down really easily. And so sometimes a more conservative value system is preserving what is already good in the culture. And there's it's creating some resistance to the new, but that's healthy, because the new has to be grounded and solid and well thought through and measured in how it's implemented. And so if you kind of see that a lot of times the people who are pushing for progressive changes, and then conservatives who are saying no, and tend to be more championing past values, if you will, then you see that there's actually a useful evolutionary tension. And so if we realize that, and then we can work together and say, let's find the common ground. If we take a progressive position and then we think about it from a more conservative angle, for instance. So in the book, I go into the $15 an hour minimum wage. So a lot of times on the progressive side, it's all about the uplifting of the downtrodden, the exploitation by companies, and there's a kind of exploitation narrative. But you can actually take the same policy and look at it from a more conservative value system and say, this is ultimately about reducing the size of government. Because what happens when companies can hire somebody for $7.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness and action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with founder of the Shift Network, Stephen Dinan, about his book, Sacred America, Sacred World, which is being held as a much-needed manifesto for a transpartisan America. Stephen, we've talked about, the fact that no single person has all of the answers, and that we need to look at the best of what each side offers rather than rejecting it just because we don't like the party. Do you think do you envision some kind of coalition government or a different kind of party forming altogether?
One of the things I talk about in Sacred America, Sacred World is the power of a polarity to drive evolution. You can think of that with the males and females, that there's a polarization, and that creates newness. There's a dynamism. So I don't necessarily think the binary party system in the United States is wrong or is going to go away. What I think we need to do is reduce our attachment to the particular polarity that we're in and our natural disposition, and really start to understand the other side and the other positions and the worldview underneath, as well as the people that party represents. And I think some healthy third parties are great, and I have no issue with that. But probably once this duopoly is kind of established, it's hard to fully shift that. And so what I say in the book is what we really need is a more enlightened wing of each party that is a transpartisan wing that is about creating this higher common ground. And I name that in the book evolutionary Republicans and evolutionary Democrats. So in that sense, the part of the identity is we're both evolutionaries. We're no longer revolutionaries trying to in a fiery, violent way overthrow the opposition. We're evolutionaries working in a more collaborative and synergistic way to evolve the new. So the evolutionary Republicans have their own candidates and their own predisposition, and the evolutionary Democrats have their own. And the idea would be to influence the evolution of each political party from the inside so that you're eventually running more and more conscious candidates. I also explore how we could create an evolutionary political leadership training that would help to prepare people at an earlier stage of their growth and maturation to really become the kind of conscious, transpartisan candidates who can shift the world. Again, not by being neutral or independent or creating a third party necessarily, by simply being a more conscious and full expression of the natural predisposition of that party. So you can think of, George Lakoff has done a really interesting analysis of how the Republican Party in many ways represents the strict father and value system, and the Democratic represents more of the nurturing mother. So in that sense, if you see it from almost a family systems part, is you want two healthy parties because they actually create a certain family structure in a way, but you don't want them at war with each other. It's not healthy for children to see their parents doing battle and dismissing and hating the other opposition, because it ends up creating a fractured family. And so that's what we have now in the United States. We have a fractured family where literally people are more upset and disappointed to have their children date somebody of the opposite political party or marry them than they are about anything else. It's no longer about race anymore. It's really about politics. And something like 50% of people would be upset if their child married somebody of the opposite political party. So we're segmenting into these two different camps, and part of that happens at a leadership level because we're witnessing this constant warfare, essentially like mom and dad fighting all the time at home. then we end up internalizing this, and then we start to see people of the other political persuasions as bad or backward thinking or somehow regressive, rather than a kind of a spirit of honoring and mutual growth and really new opportunity. And this comes all the way down to the personal level. I'll give an example from my own relationship with my father-in-law, who's no longer with us. But he was a tough Republican, and he was forwarded by my wife an article I'd written about how to respond to terrorism with doing what we need to do, but also with love for the beings on the other side. And he decided he was going to teach me a lesson and rip me a new one. and he proceeded to engage in some of the most intense cyber warfare with me, CCing most of the family and most of his friends about my positions, and he just went to battle. And he said, "Put on your flak jacket," and my wife found it horrifying, But I actually found it interesting and illuminating, and it actually, in the end, brought us to a point of more mutual respect, and then eventually real love. Like, he really began to see and respect me in a different way, and I saw and respected him. And I felt like when I needed more mentorship in business, I now run a 50-person company that has global reach. I needed more of the business grounding that he could provide, and he was helpful in that arena in many different ways. And so there was a way in which I recognized at a certain point that I needed to learn more from conservatives and Republicans, and I think vice versa sort of softened some of his positions as well. So that's where the rubber meets the road. We play out a lot of things in the big political arena, but a lot of it boils down to family relationships, community relationships, business relationships. Can we actually make peace, and even better, find new opportunities for growth by integrating value systems and perspectives that we might not naturally take, or that aren't sourced in what we've been reading. So one thing I like to do now is I go to Real Clear Politics every day, which has a nice balance of left and right, and I try to read a bit, some opinion pieces from the left and some opinion pieces from the right. And at first it can be a little bit like, a feeling of disdain, or like, I don't want to read that. But after a while, you really see the logic in it, and you understand the value systems, and you understand the human dreams and hopes and aspirations behind each side, and stop seeing them as just wrong, but rather a different orientation to life, and different priority for what's really most important.
Well, each side obviously needs to grow up and evolve, as you say in the book, but equally we need to grow up and evolve, because in England, the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, nobody expected him to get the leadership of the Labour Party. And he has a practice, he said outright, I am not going to vilify, the opposition. I am not going to do the mud-flinging that goes on in Parliament every day. What happened? People call him weak because he's refusing to enter that arena.
Yeah. Well, again, instead of just lamenting that, I think if we look at it from the conservative perspective, conservatives in general are more focused on protection and safety. So that you think of that as a traditional masculine stance of like the strong father is going to protect the family or the tribe from invaders, from the enemy. The military tends to have a more conservative value system, and so part of the test of leadership from a more conservative-oriented person is the level of toughness. And so, yes, I think it's important for us to move beyond a heavily combative energy, but there's also another level of saying, well, part of what conservatives need to feel safe is a leader who is strong enough to stand up to the bullies of the world and stand up to the real the people who don't have our best interests at heart. I mean, there's some bad actors on the global stage, and within our countries, and so there's a need sometimes for a lot of people to feel safe, to have something relaxed. They need a leader that's going to be sufficiently strong or tough. Now, can we demonstrate that without aggression? I'll give I think Justin Trudeau is a really fascinating example, because he's somebody who has very progressive politics, and he's done a lot of very heartwarming things, and people have been very excited about him. But he's also has pictures of he was trained as a boxer, and he's pictures of him like shirtless, like with pretty rippling muscles, and doing pretty advanced yogic poses, and so he has a sort of a physical toughness and a training there that I think probably is reassuring to people who need a certain level of toughness in their leaders, so that they feel safe. I had a very sweet grandmother who really loved Dick Cheney, and at the time I could not fathom this, and I would ask her, well, why do you love Dick Cheney? She's like, well, I don't know, he just makes me feel safe, and so I think we can judge that, or we can say, well, there's a human need that needs to be addressed. Is that at the most primal level, safety and security are really important for us to feel at home in the world. And so part of what people are looking for in political leaders is somebody who's going to make them feel safe. And so, people can critique Hillary Clinton, for instance, for being too tough in different ways, too aggressive on the military side, and yada, yada. And I think, I share some of that. But it's also important for her to demonstrate as perhaps the first woman president that she does have the steeliness and the mettle to stand up to bad actors and tough guys and all the stuff that happens on the global stage.
Well, you're right to point out, the fact that we tend to look up to authority figures, charismatic figures, as having more power, knowing more. We give our power away to them, and we need to stop doing that. I remember many years ago when I was writing a particular book, coming across an odd statistic that was up until that point in time, which I think was probably the 1990s, every president that had been elected in America had been the taller of the two candidates.
Exactly. That's a great statistic, and that speaks to it's a very instinctual thing. I had a mentor who used to say that that 90% of human psychology can be described by primate psychology, and so we like to think of ourselves as very advanced creatures and really thoughtful, but there's a lot of our decision making happens in the limbic system and the lower brain centers, and so there's something about taller equals leader equals safer, protected, and so we often will, subliminally go with the taller person as the leader simply because they somehow make us feel safer. It has less to do with their political positions, and there's a lot of evidence that we make decisions in a more instinctual way than always rational.
You call yourself a transpartisan progressive. What does that actually mean?
Well, I've always been very progressive in my policy points. I'm very future-oriented and going to another level. We do a lot of work with peace building worldwide. I believe that there's very innovative things happening from the grassroots all the way to global level. I really want to see peace on a planetary level in our lifetime. I'm also been engaged on sustainability fronts, and I'm interested, and I was writing articles on gay marriage before that was popular. So there's a lot of positions that I've had that have been very ahead of the curve and very progressive. And I've often, that's the candidates I've tended to get behind. However, I've also come to learn and respect from and grow from my connections with more conservatives, as I've said. And one of the great blessings in this book, just as an example, is that when I wrote it, I recognized I needed to have some conservative leaders who were backing it.
Stephen, hold that thought. We'll come back to it in a moment. I'm talking to Stephen Dinan about his new book, Sacred America, Sacred World. We'll be back in a few moments. Don't go away.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with Stephen Dinan, visionary political strategist, founder of the Shift Network, and author of the book Sacred America, Sacred World, Fulfilling Our Mission in Service to All. Stephen, your book, Sacred America, explores 4 ways that America can transcend these divisions to fulfill its higher mission. You're not talking about just America's higher mission, because we all have a higher mission, don't we? And every country has a higher mission.
Yes, I mean, that's one of the things that I really want to make clear is that I really see Sacred America as a sort of America 7.0 I use in the book. Is like we've gone through different up levels of the operating system, and moving to this Sacred America or America 7.0 is really about a global operating system. It's about service to the whole world going to its next level, and simultaneously working in a more collaborative fashion with other nations too. So the 6.0 version of America was about becoming a strong nation and protecting our own and our tribe in many ways, and often being in a more oppositional stance with the rest of the world. We have our allies, but there's often been a way it's like America first. And so I think that was a natural developmental stage that we had to go through. But ultimately, if we stay there, we stagnate and become a country that's self-interested, a kind of self-aggrandizing empire, rather than a true leader in moving to a world that works for all. So I think each country has got a sacred mission or destiny, and it's particularly important, I think, for America to rediscover and find ours, because we have so much power on the global stage, not just politically, but militarily, economically, and also culturally. We're so influential at this point that if we don't mature to the next level, it has huge impacts on the rest of the world. So I wrote this book for primarily Americans to see how we can go to the next level. But it does. The same process can essentially be applied to almost any country, because I think every country has its unique contribution, its unique culture, its unique mission, if you will, to what it can template. And I find that a fascinating thing. I once gave a talk in Mexico City that was all about Mexico's sacred contribution to the larger world, and people loved it. I gave it in Spanish, which was kind of a stretch for me, but they loved it, because I really was talking about how I saw part of Mexico's sort of sacred gift, in a way, is to demonstrate a heart-centered culture. They're a very heart-centered culture, and they have to overcome the wounding around so much drug violence as part of their process of really fulfilling their higher mission. In a way, part of America fulfilling its higher mission has to go through facing our own genocide of the Native American people and slavery and the different really shadowy things that we've done on a cultural level to suppress other countries and economically enslave them. You can read John Perkins' New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And that's not to completely dismiss America and denigrate it, but it's like we have to come to terms with the shadow side. That's the curriculum that helps us grow into greater maturity. And if we're in denial about that, we simply can't move forward.
Well, if we look at how many countries are having what they term immigration issues, isn't it just karma? I mean, look how Britain went out rampaging across the world, and now Britain is having an immigration problem. It just feels like, hey, it's payback time. It's time to start looking at this, in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that karma brings in an interesting angle. I don't really go into that in the book as much, but I do believe that karma is connected. There's collective karma as well, and in many ways, the German embrace of Syrian refugees represented a profound healing and a rectification of what happened as a result of World War II and the dissemination of so many of the Jewish diaspora, the Jewish population, the Holocaust, and in a way, it was like this great reclaiming of it. I think America needs to go through something similar with their indigenous population. When explorers first came to American shores, there were something on the order of 18 million inhabitants of this land, and it was taken down to around 1 million within 100 years. So we had a genocide that was slower moving, but it was equally the same size scale as Germany's Holocaust. And we haven't really come to terms with that in the same way that they have. And so there's a way in which immigration can be a profound healing opportunity, because we're demonstrating a generosity of spirit with populations that we might have something to do with. So I'll give it another example. I wrote an article about just to be somewhat provocative, but also realistic. And when the Syrian refugee crisis really started heating up, I wrote an article about why admitting 1 million Syrian refugees would help to defeat ISIS. And I really go into it from a perspective of historical and looking at like when you bring in a large refugee population and how there's an engine of entrepreneurship that's actually activated, it tends to soften divides. And in this case, Syria, we definitely have as a country a good bit of responsibility for the hornet's nest that's been created there. And so there's a very, very much a way of taking responsibility for helping to clean up some of the damage to the human lives involved from the misguided ways that we both led and ended the Iraq war, and the ways that sort of fragmented off large elements of Saddam Hussein's military that didn't have a job anymore, and then they basically kind of regrouped around ISIS. There's a lot of different ways we contributed to that mess, and it doesn't mean that we're the only contributors. There's certainly the regional players and a lot of other factors going in, but can we step up and be part of the solution, and in a way that actually helps heal the relationship with the Islamic world long term? Now, that position hasn't gotten a lot of traction, but I do think it's the right position for us, and I made a pretty strong case for why that should be. But so I do think the immigration issue is one where it is calling us to a higher ground, and I can get the conservative concern that you essentially have illegal immigration and porous borders, because part of protecting the old and protecting what exists is to have clear borders and to have things be legal and above board, and so I understand that perspective, and there's also the alternative perspective that this is there's a higher coming together of the Americas that immigration can represent as well.
You have a passage in the book that really impressed me. It's very, very eloquent, because it does confront us with all of our belief systems, and it did rock me in several places. And I think it will rock a lot of people. But one of the things that you said, you smooth it over so well. You said, even if we believe that we are the greatest country on earth, we are not nearly so great today as we can become tomorrow. Now, that for me, for many people who might take issue with what you're saying, might feel a little bit appalled or hurt by it, that's a great rallying cry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really essentially about evolution. Is everything we're always trying to grow to another level as individuals, as companies, as cultures, and so it gets us out of the whole dance. Are we great or are we not? It's like, well, there's a lot of great things and there's a lot of problematic aspects. There's ways that we've really done amazing service to the world, and there's ways we've created real destruction and devastation. There are things that we have done exceptionally well and things that we have botched badly. And so we're just taking it in as information and learning and growth. And well, how do we address this? How do we clean up this mistake? How do we go to the next level? And everybody can go get on board with that. It's like we all want to be greater, and part of being greater isn't just being egotistical. It's about being greater in service and greater in creating a world that works for all. And one of the things I talk about in the book is how about switching more of our defense industry dollars into microfinance funds to empower developing world entrepreneurs. And I show how if you put $10 or $15 million into developing world microfinance, these $500,000, $2,000 loans that can help people like create little businesses to get them out of poverty. You do that. I have several dozen of those loans happening now, from places from the West Bank of Palestine to Pakistan to Uganda, and it's like so these little acts of generosity and upliftment do a lot more to weave the world together, and actually are cheaper long term than military interventions.
Well, you're right. I mean, change begins with us. What else can you suggest that can help us evolve our consciousness?
Sorry, I missed it. Say it again.
What else can you suggest that helps us evolve our consciousness?
Well, I think there's all of the methodologies of personal growth. I think meditation practice is really good. I think that Things like yoga are really effective. There's a whole range of different, at the Shift Network, we feature many different teachers that are offering everything from energy medicine tips to practices for spiritual awakening. And I think all of those methodologies are good and important. I think when it comes to the political sphere, it's a lot about what I said. The cross training is to really look at our own biases and look at our own places where we polarize in our own hearts, and to consciously reach across those divides. I mean, if we want to solve more of the American Islamic divide, it's reach out and make some friends with Islamic people, and you realize they really share similar passions. Or read the Quran, or make a microfinance loan to Islamic entrepreneurs. All of these little acts start to reduce whatever polarizations we have in our own heart, and to take seriously, like every time we have a really strong negative reaction to another political leader or political position, to do some work around that, and to look at it and say, what am I rejecting in myself by rejecting this other person? Because ultimately they're just another facet of this whole sacred reality that we've been given by the divine, and that's my belief and my experience that this whole Earth is a learning laboratory, and that we are here to we're here to manifest our full potential as divine beings, and to really have compassion for beings that are stuck. Whether my wife does work in prison system, and I think going in there and really getting to know people who have killed other people and committed crimes, and it's actually very liberating. You're like, wow, I actually like this guy, and this guy's murdered somebody.
Yes.
And there's a way in which it takes it out of this whole charge and separation. So because our nature is and our media and our culture tends to reinforce the momentum towards separation, that we have to move towards creating oneness with other people that are different than we are. And some of it can happen through travel, it can happen through outreach in a community, it can happen by taking the time to go into a prison and watch a Shakespeare show. For instance, they put on Shakespeare shows at San Quentin, and there's something really powerful about people telling their stories and embodying a character from Shakespeare, and then you talk to him afterwards, and you're like, wow, I enjoy this guy. I could see hanging out with him, or you appreciate where they've come from as well.
You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with Stephen Dinan, author of the new book, Sacred America, Sacred World, Fulfilling Our Mission in Service to All. We'll be back in a few moments. Don't go away.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Welcome back. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and you're listening to What is Going On. I'm speaking with founder of the Shift Network and author of the book Sacred America, Sacred World, Stephen Dinan. Stephen, what is the Shift Network doing to help foster large-scale changes?
Well, the basic premise is that we're shifting to a whole nother operating system and that requires us to shift in our consciousness as well as how we're doing a whole variety of things. And so the core of the Shift Network is really about programs that help us awaken to our full potential and express that in different arenas. So we have courses that are about spiritual growth, about personal growth, about relationships, and then also about how do we impact the larger world, about enlightened business and about peace building and about women's work. And so there's a lot of different areas of letting go of an old paradigm and moving into a new. So in the healthcare system, it's all about integrative care and holistic approach to our health. So it's about integrating the best of Western medicine, but integrating the best of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine and energy medicine and all of the holistic practices that have been emerging, so that we really create this full spectrum approach to our health that is more masculine, feminine balance. Traditional medicine is very masculine, interventionist, take a pill, fix it, and a lot of the alternative medicine tends to be more feminine in certain ways and more about really a deeper kind of healing relationship with our bodies and our emotions and our life, and then that creates a different fabric for health. So what we do is we're really showcasing pioneers at the leading edge of each domain. And we're doing it in leadership, we're doing it in business, we're doing it in peacemaking, doing psychology, we've done stuff in Enneagram, we've done stuff in holistic health, a whole range of different areas. And when you take them as an aggregate, it's really about shifting to a new paradigm of being. And for me, that's about living in a sacred way, which is why I call it Sacred America, Sacred World. And a sacred way really recognizes that we have this amazing, beautiful blessing of this planet and this opportunity to live and grow and really, truly an amazing world. And we haven't yet found our full expression. We need to do that as a planet. We need to come together as one species, one human family that recognizes we're all brothers and sisters to each other. We need to live in reverence for what we've been given and live in balance with Mother Nature and to live in a sustainable way. We really need to end the war game permanently, and I'm very committed doing that in my lifetime. I want to be part of ending war permanently on this planet, and that is absolutely a foundation of the new paradigm. I also want to be about really empowering the balance of the masculine and feminine in the culture. So I champion women political leaders, gotten behind several who have run for office, and I think that this feminization of the political process is really central, so that we can have our decisions be sourced from the wisdom that comes from the balance of masculine and feminine. So there's a lot of different dimensions to the larger shift on planet Earth, and so we just try to bring together all the different pioneers we can. We featured over 1,000 in different domains. 90% of what we do is free, and then 10% of it is paid courses. So, I think we've had about 750,000 people in 200 countries participate in something in the Shift Network, and about 50,000 of those have gone on to paid programs. And so we try to balance the generosity with a rigorous business model that has been profitable and has been growing. And so we're doing our best to model enlightened business principles in how we do things and make our company an expression on all levels of living in a sacred way. Can we, so we have a minimum wage basically of $50,000 a year for anybody who's working full time for the shift, and that's part of our way of expressing that. We really invite everybody to show up as they are. We have share circles where people really share what's on their heart, and when people cry, they're talking about parents who are dying, friends they've lost, talk about their dreams and aspirations. So there's not a separation from between how somebody is in the rest of their life and how they show up at the Shift Network. So we see it as we're both helping to amplify and propagate the best of what's happening mainly online right now, and we're going to be moving into more media and eventually local centers. But we're also trying to demonstrate that in our day-to-day lives and how we create a company that is based on sacred principles.
I love the piece you write about July the 4th. You say that while there's beauty in the patriotic joy, we tend to focus on the glory of winning a war rather than the enshrinement of sacred principles of liberty, equality, and justice for all. And you propose a National Day of Reconciliation. Wouldn't it be wonderful if instead of celebrating wars, we all celebrate a Day of Reconciliation?
Yeah, it's a great idea to combine them too, and to maybe something that we should look into in the future. I thank you for that idea to start to seed that, because it's not just, it is about, if July 4th is a day of celebrating our country, but instead of just looking backwards, to look forwards. What is it that we want to activate in the next year? How do we create bridges and heal divides? How do we reach out across some unhealed rift in our culture that needs to be addressed? And to do that as part of our patriotism, as part of our desire for our country to be greater than we've been yesterday, tomorrow. So I think it's a really key point to not rest on our laurels, and to continue to see the path forward to being still a more beautiful country.
When you look forward, are you filled with optimism?
I believe that optimism is essential in order to create new possibilities. I think that if we shortchange ourselves if we're not willing to be optimistic, because it's very difficult to create new possibilities, whether it's a business or a movement or a course or without being optimistic, because we have to believe in the potential of the future to be better than what is now, or else we can't actually be agents of creating it. So I'm deeply optimistic, and I'm also realistic that things take time. Sometimes there's setbacks. Sometimes it appears that we're really going down a rabbit hole and we can. I don't think that the rise of Hitler in Germany was a particularly great idea, and I do think it set Germany back for a while. But look, 50, 60 years later, now they're one of the, I think in many ways, a very exemplary country, and they've really come to terms with that and matured in their whole relationship to authority and power and generosity and with the other. And so there's a way in which even the big setbacks can be grist for the mill for growing still further. So I think we need to hold on to a kind of a relentless optimism while also being really realistic and looking at what is and not glossing it over, not being Pollyannas or sticking our head in the sand, but really saying, okay, what's going on that's destructive or problematic, and we're going to face that. We're going to look at it, but we're also going to try to look at it from a stance of growth, of like, how can we use this to grow and become more mature, to become more whole, to become more united, and to really make a better demonstration of what is possible.
It's one thing to talk about what we as individual citizens can do, microfinancing, really educating ourselves better about the people that we think are so different from us, to realise that actually they're just the same. But when it comes to things like transforming the banking system, transforming the education system, these are big tasks. How possible do you think it is, and in what kind of time frame?
So time frames, one mentor I had said he likes to think about cultural evolution in 500-year time spans, which was a real paradigm shifter for me, because we're such a instant gratification culture now. But if we really think about the big game of evolving our world, it's on a long trajectory. It's in decades, sometimes centuries. Sometimes we can go fast. Gay marriage went really fast. Sometimes things take longer. But if we're just clear on the trajectory and we're patient about the unfolding, then we can really do it. Now, banking is a great example where it's been very much stuck in a lot of different ways, and I talk about how central banking is a distortion of the money system, for instance, where you basically have private interests that are profiting on the creation of money, which is a public good, and that creates distortion. So I really think long-term we do need to have a deep reform of the Federal Reserve and to take back the money creation powers for the people rather than for private interest. And yet the way to do that isn't necessarily first to go head-on against the Federal Reserve. That might be helpful, but what's interesting is the innovations happening at the periphery. The Bank of North Dakota has been a great example of a publicly owned institution, basically acts like a mini Federal Reserve for North Dakota. It's led to a lot of prosperity. They weathered the downturn better than any other state. They've had run a surplus, given money back to the people, and part of it is because and they haven't run the private banks out of business, but they have a public bank that basically helps to fund infrastructure and helps to do a lot of things that help grow the economy in a complementary way to the private banks. So there's a whole movement afoot. I know that I think Seattle's looking at a private bank. It's happening, percolating all around now. So you can have cities, country or states do essentially public banks that are for the common good, and that movement is growing. And as there's more examples, that's going to become. If we can help amplify those. I'll give an example. I went to a fundraiser with Gavin Newsom and talked to him afterwards about, hey, have you looked into the North Dakota banking system and how that could be implemented in California? He's running for governor. He's probably the likely next governor of California. He was intrigued with the idea. He says, I haven't heard anything about it. Why don't you share more about it? And I shared a bit of what I knew and plant a little seed there. And you do the same with elected officials. And people are looking for innovation. If we can be amplifiers of innovation to our elected representatives. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is how important it is to be a sacred citizen and be actively engaged in voicing our opinions to our representatives. That's really what they're there for. We can think about being politically involved as being involved in elections, but that's really should be a smaller percentage of our time than positively engaging our elected representatives in doing their job and making our opinions and ideas known. And so if we're helping to, create personal connections with staffers within our congressional or Senate offices, we can help to feed them really cool, interesting things that we come across, and that may then help to bump us along to the next level.
Stephen, I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank you for stepping up to the plate and showing us what is possible.
Thank you. It's been a delight, and for folks who want to find out more, sacredamerica.net.
And Sacred America, Sacred World, fulfilling our mission in service, is published by Hampton Road, and you can find out more about Shift Network at theshiftnetwork.com. That's it for today. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. Thanks for being with me. I look forward to being with you same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.